Thank you, Mr. Peters.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else?
Joe Kelly, just to enter the evaporation discussion. Those systems, at least what I've seen, are the very expensive systems due to the technological advances. So that's where it could possibly go in the very future. Instead of having a pressure dose system, could go on up to this because of state mandate. Getting into the definitions, page 4, number 8, bedroom has changed to include room previously excluded, offices, dens, etc. If it has a closable door or a closet or a direct access to a bathroom, they are considered bedrooms. Considering this definition, at what level of review is application of the bedroom applied to office, den, etc. for on-site wastewater treatment? What legal ramifications does this document have on the owner? Example, a house advertised as a 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath, yet the house plans show a den. Does this document change the disclosure requirements? On page 40, number 13, minimum capacity septic tank shows a 300-gallon capacity difference between 2 and 3 bedrooms. Has a 2 and 3 bedroom is a 1,200-gallon, and a 4-bedroom which has 1,500 gallons. The future confusion between different building codes of existing homes and new homes this will add is not worth it. Retain the old description. Page 8, number 47, flood hazard, a risk of inundation during or following a 24-hour, 100-year storm event. I just have to add this. Does this include obstructed item 48 flowing stream the county, state water, and FEMA know about, but unlike the Rooster Ranch, fail to assist property owners? Page 8, number 50, groundwater. For purpose of these regulations, groundwater is subsurface water that does not demonstrate the physical, chemical, or biological characteristics of effluent. Should this contain a depth below surface? My concern, a shallow well in an obstructed flowing stream or near a obstructed flowing stream causing a flood condition may create the issues contained in the definitions of groundwater, by the groundwater getting into the well, a discharge of groundwater into the OWTS, which is prohibited. Page 14, number 4, depth below surface is emphasized on page 20E, groundwater conditions. Wastewater. Within the definition, are you able to identify, differentiate human waste from animal waste from a non-point source pollution? How is it dealt with page 13, C1, public waters, same question. And I found it interesting that the concept of issue of nitrate travel, and in fact, due to these streams and in one particular area, Nassau Creek, that has a lot of nitrate going through it from animal waste, gives me grave concern, but apparently others don't care about it. This concept of realm of influence versus, and that's on page 15, it was brought up, the realm of influence, and it's a general, an on-water treatment system permit shall not be issued if a wastewater delivery system is within 200 feet. As I stated before, the system of the hierarchy within these systems is very expensive, and I think that this concept of expense and cost, although it is a realm of influence, so I think we're stuck with it, but it should be based on the cost basis of an on-site versus a public connection system. And within that on-site system should be that it meets the standards of the time and possibly into the future. Page 17, number 7, does the county have records of installed septic tank size for all properties, or is a requirement of a pumped and cleaned? By the way, what does a cleaning entail? To determine septic tank size, will it be the responsibility of the tank pumping company to provide the county with information on existing tank sizes throughout the county that he might pump for the benefit of a correlation of information, cumulative information? And will the county, when it gets into this bedroom size issue, Will the county accept a paid contractor statement as to septic tank size installed? In other words, from the original contractor that put the tank in, or from the septic tank pumper who pumps it, and it, I would think, is qualified to determine the size and capacity of the tank if there is an issue of wanting to expand a leach field. Page 20, permit required. This one was a very confusing area. It was hard to read. It needs to be cleaned up to reflect the answer. Is it or isn't it required? Perhaps through a better separation or a determination of is and isn't, and two different segments. Page 25, major repairs, number 8, low-flow plumbing fixtures, pressure reducers, and other means of reducing wastewater flow shall be considered for all system repairs. Are these mandated or by agreement of property owners may be installed? If there's is there an installation cost limit? What is the limit of the county's authority? This bothers me in some respects in that homes that were built in the last few years might have a 1.6, and I believe in this document it says a lesser gallon per minute flush. And it is also changing not only the toilet and shower heads and faucet fixtures. This can get extremely expensive when you figure all the new stuff that is out there, plus the cost of the labor that goes along with it. Page 26A, designation. Is information on these areas currently being cataloged to the APN for public information of disclosure to prospective buyers through county or title company information? I think this is important. Have risers and covers been tested for longevity regarding septic tank gases? As I've seen, and probably these gentlemen over here, if they're involved within it, have seen that concrete tanks have a tendency, if they are not being able to have a release, which they don't, of these gases, even if it was filtered, cause them to, over a period of time, to deteriorate. Is there a carbon footprint chart based on electrical energy use? And I'll do it real simply on this. A use of a pressure dose system compared to a standard gravity flow system. That would be interesting because we're all concerned about greening of America and these carbon footprints. In conjunction with this on-site wastewater regulation, it causes questions of infrastructure capabilities, infrastructure needed, cost, and build-out. That information is needed. We've had a whole lot of information today, but it all needs to be correlated, and it needs to be done soon, or we're just moving things up, but without and we might bypass this, what we get to, of the concept of build-out, when no more can happen in this county. How many manufacturers of engineered wastewater systems are approved for use in this county? This is something that concerns me. Years ago, Advantech was the only one that was allowed in this county, and there was a gentleman, I believe it was out of New York. I know I talked to him about looking at a franchise, and I never followed up on it because it seemed at the time it didn't matter what you tried to do. It wasn't going to get looked at. Disposal trench chamber units. Are different sizes approved, and how many manufacturers of approved chamber units are within the realm for the county approval? What effect do repair permits have on property tax reassessment? A construction permits triggers a reassessment. So many issues cause a reassessment event or cause a mandate on a property owner. Perhaps because a seat is not offered. And I've seen this overall in a lot of issues. Either any agents, almost any agency, whether it be the state, the county, cities, whatever. No, there has not been an offer to the State Board of Equalization to send a representative or the county assessor to send a representative. Now it might seem kind of not good use of time, but in fact it is, if they're there to assist and work for the people of the county in respects to the concept of property taxation. Government may consider it transparent, but it is not full disclosure of mandates, cause, and effect. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Mr. Moss, you can get hold of Mr. Kelly to answer his questions. It was a very thorough process and a lot of input from people in the business within Calaveras, and his questions could be answered. Is there anyone else who would like to address the board on this? Okay, I'm going to bring it back to the board. Does the board have any questions or comments? I do, Mr. On inspector, that they be certified and so forth, as Mr. Rosenfeld talked about. So an issue that's come up before with somebody read to leave earlier. If they're certified and they do the inspection, they say it's fine. What is our then responsibility of our certified inspector in relation to that? We just, take their word for it? Does Ron have to go back out? Where are we on that one?
No, Ron does not have to go back out. What we're doing is we're counting on the OWTS inspector to do a thorough job. Now, I'll be honest with you, and this does not get in the realm of this code, but there are a lot of concerns and questions about property transfer and what constitutes an inspection. This code does not address that. Okay. But the standards for the NOT and the CAWA actually give guidance to the people that actually do these inspections. So although, yes, Ron would qualify as an engineer and also as an inspector, as an OWTS inspector, so does the septic pumper. Now, the interesting thing is, on the septic pumper end of it, not only will they be required to have these certifications, in other words, i.e. self-regulating, but in addition to that, they're also registered through the Environmental Health Department to actually use those trucks, to do the pumping, to file reports with us, as in, where you pump the tank, where the effluent is being disposed of. It might be Alameda County. We've talked a lot about that in the past. So actually, they're being overseen on a couple of different avenues. So, but the bottom line is, you are correct. If an inspector says that I pump the tank is functioning properly, or the tank is failing, then yes, we're going to go with their recommendation.
Okay. You mentioned there could be small changes, a regulation changes, a state regulation. Does this mean it has to come back to the board, or are we giving you some latitude to make some minor changes? I mean,
generally my intent would be to come back to the board just with a change to a resolution and an adoption of a new resolution that would incorporate that change, so that, because the document is a board adopted document, again, maybe once a year, maybe once every 2 years.
And I have one more, because it has been an issue in Ebbets Pass on grade.
Yes.
Is it still the 40%? No.
Well, it's 40% by code, but under the experimental policy, we're allowing over 40%, and we have 3 systems installed that we're monitoring right now.
As a matter of fact, the SJB Consulting is the group that worked on the drip system emitters that you see under the engineer, or actually the experimental end of this document. Those would be a likely candidate for a steep slope.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I think I asked you my other questions already. Thank you.
I have a question, Brian. Let's say in 1998, I bought a 5-acre parcel, and I lived somewhere else. And when I bought the property in '98, there was either a perk test on it. There's no building on it; it's bare property, but it had a perk test on it, or it had an OWTS on it for some reason. And now it's 2010, 2011, I'm getting ready to retire, and this was my retirement property, and now I want to go to the building department and get a permit to build a house. How does this affect somebody in that circumstance?
Is the OWTS already in the ground or not?
It could be, or you could have a perk test on it. Some properties do have, for some reasons, they do have a septic. Somebody was going to build something, they got approved one, but
If it's in the ground, then I don't see any conflict with the building department in issuing a permit because it met the standards of the time. And so
As
it's
long
not
as
really.
it's bedrooms for bedrooms.
Yeah, bedrooms for bedrooms.
exactly right. If it was approved for a 3-bedroom home or whatever.
Now, if we take it to another step, and current code, actually in the Title 13, which is not these regulations, but County Code Title 13 addresses on-site wastewater as well. If they keep a permit current, in other words, you took out a permit in 1998, and ever since then annually you're updating that permit because you keep talking about installing the system, we will allow you to put in the ground what was approved in 1998. If you let that permit expire, then all bets are off. You've got to look at the system again and say, yes, this will work, or no, we need to go to something else. So that has more to do with Title 13 than it does with this. But it has actually worked well.
Well, it has worked well, and that's if you had design plans in 1998, that works. If you only had soils done, okay, and you had the perk test, and you
perk test.
subjected to the new rules and regulations, you could use the old soils, soil logs,
you
but
can't.
your new system design would have to be based off of the old soil logs.
Sure. But you could use what, in 1998, the soils test.
Yes, anything prior, I believe the USDA sheets come out in 1990, 1991.
But
So
that's
anything that's
only
logged on the
as
sheets
long
are
as
okay.
the building permit is kept updated. Once it's lapsed,
Well,
he'd have to start again.
we're speaking of the on-site
your
permit.
plans,
Right.
just
Yeah,
your,
the plans.
just your septic plans.
Yeah, but I think the bottom line is, you know, for Supervisor Tomilli, is if you've done the soils, and yes, we can use those soils for design.
All right.
Are there any other, Russ?
Yeah, Brian, my eyes began to cross a little bit as I was reading this, and particularly the area of what constitutes the point at which you have to take out a permit for a repair. Mr. Gauze came out to my place a year and a half ago or so and did an inspection and a pumping, and in the process of that his services found a distribution line that was, I mean, the house was new when I moved into it, but it was broken before I got there. You know, so I just don't want to have this result in the requirement. If he were to come out and find that broken distribution line, he could fix it in 5 minutes. He's got this stuff on his truck to fix it. I certainly don't want to create a situation where he's got to come down and fill out an application for a permit to fix a line that, you know, take him 10 times longer to get here than to fix it. So what's your thought on that?
That concern has actually been brought up, and that has to do with a minor repair versus a major repair. Ron can probably address this even better than I can because he's out in the field. But the bottom line is that what I will say about that is, if Mr. Goss is out there and he calls up and he says, I think I've got a broken distribution box, or I've got a broken lateral with inside the leach field which requires a minor repair, we ask him, call us up, tell us that's what you're doing. You can, you know, if he can fix it in 5 minutes or half hour or 3 hours, he can move forward with that, okay? But then we want him to come in and fill out the paperwork after. Now, normally what's going to happen, and Ron can really elaborate on this because of what he sees out in the field. Much of the time, the qualified professional is going to look at it and go, well, I know what I've got out there. I've got a crushed line. I've got a broken distribution box. That requires a minor repair. I'll get that taken care of. I'm going to go to work on it. But with that said, we will work with the community. Ron?
Yes. That we've had long discussions about that with Mike Masters and Rob and SJB Consulting. But the reason that we need the minor repair, first of all, we have a paper trail and what the repair was, okay, on that parcel. So we know who fixed it or who did inside the system. And the big issue was the tight line from the tank to the D-box or to the distribution lateral, whatever it may be. But we still need to see that connection, or how they end up connecting the pipe or taking it out of the septic tank like in standard systems. and put in that tight line in. So without separating out standards and engineers who engineered systems, because if you replace that lateral in a gravity standard system, you're going to be reconnecting to the tank, and you need to see that routed and such if you do that. So we left it at the minor repair. Now, the issue was exactly that, the 5-minute fix and coming down here and spending the time to get that repair permit. We've always been user-friendly and accept that phone calls and knowing that the repair is being done. And I think everybody in the regulated community can attest to that we have been user-friendly, and we would, allow that, certainly. It's not a problem there.
And at the same time, what Ron would request, let's say it's a broken line coming out of the tank, and they put in a new distribution box. So here's the end of the tank, you've got your lateral, and then it goes to the first distribution box. Instead of having somebody like Kevin, leave the whole thing open, because he's already out there, what we'd ask him to do is leave the ends open. So when he actually does pull out that permit, Ron's going to go out there, take a look at it, make sure that everything is routed properly so they can cover it. So that's part of that user-friendly.
And that's what the repair permit basically does is cover inspection time. It's covered, basically on an hourly basis. That's how the permit fees were set up.
Are there any other questions or comments? And the board's, yes, would you like to come up?
Yeah, first I'd like to thank Brian and his staff and everybody that contributed to this as well, because clarity is what we're looking for. I know a person, well, first time Kevin at Foothill Sanitary, but is when you're out there in the working environment, if we have no standards to go by, you're dealing with a wide range of varieties from different people doing the same type of business. There's nothing set in stone or any ordinances to go by. So one of the things that have excited me over the last years is this CAWA and not associations and the minimum standards that they put forth. Just like a homeowners association could have a little more strict rules or regulations versus what the county says. The CAWA and not is training individuals, business owners for this minimum standard. And along with the county having it in their ordinance, it gives an individual like myself clarity, which takes all the confusion out of anything that I'm doing. And I have something etched in stone that says this is why I'm doing it, besides somebody just thinking it's a personal opinion. I know for myself, a lot of times, my personal opinion has been excluded or not been taken well, because a lot of times it's somebody just thinking you're trying to make a dollar. When I know for my business and individuals that I do work with, our consumer, our individuals, our homeowners out there, trying to educate them along with doing good work for them so their systems last longer and it protects our environment. So I just want to say thank you to Brian. I know he has taken a lot of heat, some from me sometimes, but I think this is a good thing in the works for the county, and it's very much appreciated. Thank you.
Brian, I wanted to find out whether you had a level of comfort with a suggestion I'd like to make to you. You've got that 1 year limit on the composting toilets. I wonder whether, since gray water technology and composting toilets are undergoing quite an evolution, technologically speaking, I'm wondering whether you'd be comfortable with the authority to extend that 1 year in the event that people have a system that's acceptable to you and that includes a 2 to 3 year maintenance and operation agreement. Do you feel comfortable with that discretion? And if you do, I'd certainly be open to extending that as part of this. There's a lot of pressure on this, and I'd sure like us to keep up with technology as it comes, and when it's acceptable to you, seems that it should be ministerial in nature, and that we should go forward with it.
You could probably write that down.
I don't see why we can't. I don't see why we can't look at that and have the department discretion. There's something that was brought up, and you just touched on it, and that's what I'm going to cover. Maintenance and operation, which is a different animal than what we're looking at today. Actually, that's a separate document that hasn't been developed. We haven't developed yet. But it is something that would also fall in the purview of what you were just talking about, maintenance and operation of systems. Where does the county get involved and where does it not get involved? Where is it the property owner's responsibility versus government's responsibility to say that yes, indeed, a system shall be maintained? Here's the point. The Advantech systems that were brought up today, and by the way, something was brought up about, will we just look at Advantech systems? The answer to that, of course, is no. That might have been the case at one time, I don't know. But today, experimental systems, intermittent sands, whatever you happen to propose to a qualified professional. But I would say, again, back to the maintenance end of it, something we need to look at. And we've got to be very careful when we do that, not just for that, but for systems in general, because in the past, on the Advantech systems, I think that they used to sign a 3-year contract. And for some reason, the county was getting involved in that. We're no longer getting involved in that because that's between the vendor
And the person doing it.
and the person. Exactly. Why we were involved in that and making the public jump through those hoops at a permanent application stage is a little bit beyond me, but it's one of those things we took care of and quite frankly, eliminated.
All right, well, I'm not suggesting that we get into some kind of onerous oversight of it. I just want to make sure that whatever the arrangement is acceptable to you technologically and that you feel it's a responsible situation that you're permitting and extending. So however you would put that together, I want you to know I'm in favor of that, and I don't know what my fellow board members feel about it, but I'd sure like us to keep up with the times. Many other counties and most of the rest of the states have already adopted these kinds of things.
Which counties have done it, do you know?
I don't have the California ones, but there's quite a list of half of the state of Minnesota, all of Alaska. There's all kinds of.
Mr. Rosenfield.
Rosefield, thank you.
Oh, Rosefield, sorry.
Yeah, I certainly understand both positions I'm hearing right now. Brian is talking about the political hot potato that happens when you start requiring as a jurisdiction ongoing operation and maintenance of these systems. However, the needs of the first 3 years, which are mandatory through the NSF certification, are ongoing. So there are many other counties, and I could list them off as well as states right now, who have now moved into the mandatory operation and maintenance programs, and that's why I said a little earlier, you're going to be going there. I mean, maybe it's not appropriate right now because I think these are excellent first steps. The efforts I've seen is right on track with, I think, what needs to happen, because if you talk about the ongoing O&M right now, I've been involved in a number of counties' processes, and I've seen the reaction that happens in the process coming to a grinding halt, and all of the good work that's been done goes away. So I believe in the alternative technologies, including composting toilets and gray water. It is going to be in the future of on-site, but composting toilets in particular require an extreme amount of management that the typical system owner today is not ready for. And that doesn't mean that in emergency situations and what you're asking for is not a viable option. But I think that the position of the ongoing county's involvement in O&M, it's coming. But I don't know if this current time is right. So all of the time, don't get me wrong, I think the time is right. But I think in the process, the direction that's being proposed is appropriate.
Steve, did you
Well, I guess what I'd be interested in is whether the board is comfortable giving Brian some discretion to work out an arrangement for the possible extension beyond a year of systems and circumstances which seem appropriate. And I don't want to write the language here. I just would encourage some flexibility in that regard, because I know of many circumstances where it is appropriate. I would agree with you that the level of maintenance for composting toilets is beyond the average citizen, but I would also suggest to you that we have a number of circumstances, people in this county that are more than capable of managing those, and actually already are.
Well, I would think that if it goes beyond a year, I guess a year was chosen because that's the standard, or
Actually, that 1 year is actually from the original 1993 document.
well,
That makes sense.
my question is then, if you're allowed, give him some discretion to go past the 1 year, then who, do we send an inspector out at that time before it's renewed to make sure that the ongoing maintenance has been done correctly, or even past the 2 years if it goes past there? I mean, some level of inspection needs to be taking place here, because that system, if it's not designed to go past that or what have you, it needs continuous maintenance. We have to verify that so it doesn't get to a point where it's not operating properly or it's not being pumped properly or what have you. So I guess that's my concern.
And you're back to the O&M issue, because although certainly I'm not opposed to the discretion issue, because we put a lot of discretion in this document, as you notice. That's not an issue, but I think, again, we need to be very careful when it comes to something like this, that this isn't something we really work with or have worked with in the past to a great degree. So, are we moving in, as Kent was saying, into the O&M realm if we're going to address this kind of thing? Its time is now, but I agree with Kent as well. I think we're a little early in the process for that. But if it's the wish of the board for us to have discretion, then it's something we need to sit back and figure out, okay, how many times are we going to say, yes, this works? Because now we're starting to getting into that experimental phase thing of regular on-site wastewater treatment systems. We don't want to discourage, not that we want to discourage that, but we don't want to discourage known technologies as put forward by our qualified professionals out here. They're the ones that do this every day.
I don't disagree with that.
They know what works and what doesn't work. So my only concern with that is we want to be careful not to override experimental systems that are monitored. They have to jump through hoops, for 3 years saying, yes, this is working. And I just want to be careful how we do this if that's the board's wish.
It's not my wish at this time. I remember getting into this discussion on experimental systems with the Board of Realtors or with Realtors, and on who should be inspecting the systems, and then what happens when the property changes hands, and how often we should have the septic people going out and doing cleaning out the septic systems when one home is full-time and one home is used twice a year. I think this needs to be thought through a little bit more carefully, because it's the same issue, it's just a different product. I mean, it's we're talking, the toilets and that system versus the septic systems. And I remember this room being packed with people in the business and with realtors, and Al Segali hadn't started the taxpayers group yet, but he would have been here too. So I think if Steve's got some examples and there's some people that might want to be test cases, and Brian is they're willing to work with them, those people, I'd be open to that, the same as the experimental system. I'm not willing to make any changes to this to accommodate that. That's me. I don't know where the rest of you are.
I'm very much inclined to think that a year passes by far too quickly. It seems like the older I get, the faster it goes, but a year is no time at all. This is an emergency situation. The composting toilet can be used. I see no reason to have it shut off at 12 months. You should have the latitude to use common sense on that. So,
well, Steve wasn't talking emergency. I think he was talking about normal operating.
Well, I'm talking about two different things. There are a lot of places, and I'm not going to point them out particularly, but there are a lot of places where people do not have the money to put in a system, and they're living in trailers or places out there in the woods. And the difference is either they do something that is like a composting toilet, or as most people are doing right now, they're digging a hole and putting a pipe going out into it. I'd like to see those things. To me, that is an emergency, especially where it's on the watershed. And I would like to have ways for people to be able to do things that are more sanitary, more safe in the way of public safety, and that we at least give you discretion to permit where it seems appropriate. That's on the, so I guess that fits with emergency. And the other is where there are people, responsible people, who are prepared to handle this new technology as pilots and introduce this in a way under your auspices that allow us to check some new stuff out. And I think the year is arbitrary. I'd like to give you discretion to both determine what you think is worth trying out and the circumstances under which that might happen and the length of time that's appropriate for that. I think that's in your domain, and I don't really care to spend a lot more time here with it.
Well, that's fine with me. If he wants, I'll give him the latitude, but I'd be interested to see what you bring back to us once this is finalized.
Yes. Yeah, that's all I'm suggesting, that they work it out.
That's fine with me.
Well, for myself, I'm for keeping the 1 year. I mean, to me, if we're going to have experimental systems, it's important to make sure they're working correctly, they're being installed correctly, that they're being maintained correctly, et cetera. It's not a question of how quickly a year passes. It's a question of the system or the systems being utilized as they're designed, and does this design work to achieve an acceptable outcome. So I don't mind the 1 year inspection to see how the system's working. If you do the inspection in 1 year, do you do the inspection again then in another year, or do you once you do an inspection? My feeling would be do an inspection in a year, make sure that the experimental system is working, and then if you wanted to grant something like 2 years or 3 years or something, to me that would be acceptable. But I think initially you need to make sure that the system's working as intended.
That's fine with me. The problem is the current language eliminates the system after a year. It sunsets it. You're not allowed to continue it past a year.
I think the answer, I think there's a really easy answer to this. This is from a proposal. We can move that under experimental as an experimental system. That already requires monitoring. That already requires a down payment of X amount of dollars for 3 years, hence monitoring, which takes care of the monitoring issue. It takes care of the 1 year sunset, but it also puts it in the realm of the other experimental systems that are being monitored. So it's not just kind of out there and we don't know if it's working and we'll get out there and when we can get there. So that may be an option for the board to consider.
Yeah, if I may again, I'll keep it short. Butte County in their Concal region has put together a pretty extensive section of their ordinance on composting toilets and gray water. It's quite rigorous in its O&M requirements because of the reason it is very new and experimental, and there'll be a lot of education involved. So I would encourage you, if you're involved with it.
I have, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, but it's an example, I think, of an option that, but I think the suggestion to just allow them to do it at their discretion without requirements for operation and maintenance is a recipe for disaster in terms of liability for the county. So I think you need to consider the O&M component if you're going to allow that as an option.
Well, just for a moment, does Brian's suggestion of putting in the experimental, which includes some ongoing review but not a whole lot of process, is that acceptable to you? Do you think that is a recipe for disaster, or will that work?
Well, as I said, in the early stages of use of composting toilets, there is a lot of education involved. And I think, once again, to revisit a lot of thought that's gone into it, for instance, as I said in the Concal example, is worth consideration before you set it into stone. once a year is not going to be sufficient in observing a composting toilet program. Yeah, and then you come into what are the requirements of the inspectors going to be, here we go again, in terms of operation and maintenance, which is a new level of expertise that, as I said, I know you'll visit in the future. How do you set the requirement right now for O&M service providers, specific to composting toilets and gray water for those folks? But you're asking now, and it's a good, I believe this needs to move forward. Don't get me wrong. As I said, there is a big place for composting toilets and gray water in the future of on-site. But I think we have to be very careful that we make sure they work, because the first couple of examples of failures or of public health situations are going to result in a failed technology, and that's not what we want to see. We want to see positive programs that are going to support the positive growth of the decentralized wastewater option, which is really what we're talking about here. We're talking about a new infrastructure that's going to supplement our struggling centralized sewer systems, because they're failing right and left as the underground infrastructures are deteriorating on them. They're becoming overwhelmed. They can't handle the growth. So nationally, decentralized wastewater is where it's going, but we have to be very careful that what we propose is long-term in its solution.
I do have a proposal, and I think this will work. If we move forward with the existing language, I want the board to remember this is a living document. If somebody came in today with a composting toilet, which we haven't had any applications, but if somebody did, that would give us a year, as this stands today, as the board, if you're to adopt the existing language, it gives us a year to look at what Kit's talking about. Is this something we move into the experimental next year? And oh, by the way, these are the monitoring requirements. As you know, I can go to Buttes, look at Buttes O&M, and I understand it's a very good document. I haven't had a chance to review it myself. That is true. But that gives us some time to actually look at that and say, okay, we can move this into experimental. It's easily adopted 6 months from now or a year from now, still well within that existing one-year time frame. So that would be my recommendation.
Mr. Peters.
At the risk of talking it to death, just one other recommendation with respect to composting toilets. They're a little different classification of experimental system. I mean, we talk about experimental treatment systems and sand filters versus textile filters and aerobic units, and there are a million of them. But composting toilets are a bit different in that, in theory, you could develop a property and construct very expensive improvements on the property using or based on composting toilets, only to find out down the road that they don't really work the way everybody anticipated. And unless you've identified in advance an option for an on-site solution, you're stuck with very expensive infrastructure improvements and no way to deal with the failed technology. And I'm not suggesting in any way that composting toilets are a bad idea. I'm just suggesting that if you do see them as a viable experimental option, at least do enough upfront work on the parcel to demonstrate that it can take some kind of a septic system, so that you've got that as a plan B in case the composting toilet option doesn't work out the way you hoped.
Very good point, because it's no different than a regular on-site decentralized wastewater treatment system. We always ask for expansion. We didn't need for expansion if this fails. So I think, again, that the answer is and my recommendation is, leave things as they are today. This still gives us a year to do the investigation and review, to talk to people like Kit, to talk to people like Rob and others who actually are familiar with technology, and say what works and what doesn't work. Let's take a look at Buttes, and again, it's supposed to be a very good document, and then we can all kind of look at it together. At the risk of burning them out, because they all have many hours with this document already, but that would be a separate issue, and it would be an addendum to the existing document. That would be my recommendation, because you already have a year. You already have a year lead, and this hasn't been adopted today, and we don't have any applications.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Segale, could you keep it brief, please?
Yeah, very brief. The alternative of having just a holding tank without a period of time that it must be removed would be a simple solution in those rare cases where an on-site system would not be workable because of geologic conditions. And if there's no downside to it, if you want to have a regulation, you could perhaps require installation of an alarm that would go off when the sewage went to a certain height.
And in our noise ordinance, septic alarms are exempt. Okay, I want to bring it back to the board for a decision. Is the board ready for Mr. Moss to bring this back for formal adoption? Did you want to make some modifications before it's done? Russ?
I'm ready to tell him to bring it back, but Brian, would you bring this subject back after lunch next time?
Okay. Gary?
I'm ready for him to bring it back
Steve?
in his recommendation.
Tom?
That's where I am.
Yes, 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you for your
This
time. Thank you everybody
studies-
for participating in all your.
We have 2 closed sessions, and we will do them after lunch.
Thank you.
Tom can't stay awake for me.
I'm afraid we'll be in a big rush about to go to the doghouse again.